But I do think this GDP is poised to slow down for two reasons. One, the tariffs, because I just think it's just going to take time for companies to readjust and reset those gears in the proper wheels. And number two, we still got these Doge layoffs that are lurking out there in the public sector.
What about all this talk about, we've heard for the last X number of years that there's so much money on the sidelines, just waiting, just waiting, just waiting. Where's that money now?
I think it's less than it was, and I think if I'm right, and we see a 5 to 10% drop, it's going to be necessary to cover margin calls.
So a 10% drop with the S&P at 550, you're looking at the S&P at 500.
No,
Hey everybody, welcome back to Markets and Madness, the place where we discuss the madness that occurs when economics, politics, and personalities all move in different directions. This is like Mr. Toad's wild ride. We are up, down. Today is Wednesday, April 30th. GDP came out this morning. Markets got crushed at the open, and here at the close, we're starting to see a rally back. Good afternoon, Tim. How you doing?
hey there, Fred. You're right, wild ride for sure.
Yeah.
I put on some hedges now. I'm a little afraid of the downside, so I got pretty involved, and of course, my P&L's not rewarded me because we rallied at the close.
We all had that big turnaround. Um, yeah, I mean, we got to see some good news soon for this market to rally to hold its rally. Let's put it that way. I guess you're of the opinion that we're not going to see some good news in the near future.
I think we are, but I think it's already in the market. I think they've already telegraphed India in a big way. So, how much of that is in the market? Here's what I'm thinking. The U.S. economy drives the world economy. And the U.S. economy is this big ship that's been moving along, powered by borrowed money for a long time, and it's powering the world. And the captain, wearing a blue suit and a red tie, screamed out, "All ahead, stop." And he shut everything down and says, "All right, now, while I'm shut down here, I'm going to change the propulsion system and I'm going to turn this ship around and we're going to run on propane instead of what we've been running on all this while." And we're starting to see it. When you throw a monkey wrench into world growth like this, these parts are going to take a little time to remesh and these gears reconnect. So I think this slowdown we've been talking about has been accelerated by this tariffs. And I thought when I saw GDP this morning, I thought, okay, it's beginning. So maybe it's not, based on some of the things we've seen, but it's going to start happening soon. He's slowing everything down, and the tariffs got everybody in confused and in chaos. And it's going to take a long time for these deals to get on the table. First of all, the government's got to figure out what the hell the tariff picture looks like and what the trade picture looks like and whether or not they're eliminating these trade barriers. And who knows how long that's going to take. But let's assume it happens tomorrow, which it's not. So then tomorrow, all the CEOs got to get all the trade people together and verify all the new deals with the new counterparts and restructure all of their businesses, essentially. And that's going to involve, I'm going to shift the supplier from China to India, from India to the Far East, and all of that has to take place. And that's going to slow everything down. So I think growth is going to slow coming up very shortly. And we're going to start to see the impact of this. In
Don't you
addition,
don't you think that was the impetus of why we sold off as much as we did a month ago? Like the big sell off. That's what everybody projected, and then I think they're hoping for good news. I'm not saying the downside is over. I just think that we have a little bit more time before we throw the towel in, so to speak, that there's going to be any more good news.
Well, we got another shoe to drop, and that is basically whether or not the public sector layoffs are going to impact this economy. So that's happening at the same time.
Hmm.
So I don't really see a big argument for a surge in GDP here. So we start to see contraction, you know. We could say, all right, well, these numbers are temporary and they're indicative, but we're going to feel it. And I think the market's going to respond to that. And ironically, the very people that want to hang Trump for doing what he's doing are the same people that would hang him if he didn't do it, and we went along with business as usual. You know,
Right.
I mean, I got to do a talk tomorrow morning, and I started to think about what I'm going to say. And I think the first thing to think about is what would happen if there were no Trump. Let's say either the Republicans or the Democrats, Harris or whoever, win the election, and we're looking at business as usual. Well, we got a $6 trillion deficit for the next foreseeable future. So let's multiply 6 trillion times 3, and that puts roughly another 18 trillion on top of the debt. So now we're financing $50 trillion in debt. And let's assume interest rates stay the same. They don't go up. We still have to finance $50 trillion. And that's going to choke off this economy too. So the alternative was really unthinkable. So when I look at this and say, oh, things are going to slow down, it sounds like I'm really negative, but I'm not. I mean, it's just we had a bad choice and a worse choice.
I um, uh, I wrote this to someone yesterday, actually this morning. It was going on about Trump and the tariffs and how people are going to look at things and where it's going. And I said, we're at a point now where we're looking at short-term pain. We got to see if his policies work or not. And if they do, we could look at, decades of growth. But right now, we're looking at short-term pain. And we've been saying that for a long time. How short is short-term and how far can short-term go? I don't know. I'm of the opinion now that we slowly look to, like we did a couple of weeks ago, a month ago, sell some downside puts, get some good stocks at cheap levels with high volatility, and enjoy those returns.
You mean buy some downside puts,
Sell some downside puts.
buy some puts, buy some
Yeah, because
protection.
when the market, no, just the opposite. When the market does flush out,
Okay.
you're setting yourself up for the upside move, and the upside move I think is going to be stronger. Did you see what he said today? They're talking about, or maybe it was yesterday. They're talking about tax breaks for bringing your warehouses back online.
Very bullish.
Yeah, very
Very
bullish.
bullish.
Now he's got to get it passed, and he's still talking about the idea of, and it's campaign promises. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. His base loves it. And, if it comes about, it'll benefit me, no doubt. And it'll
Okay.
benefit
Well,
you.
let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
We had a sell off. We're off, I don't know, arguably 6% from the highs. I mean,
I
I'm
thought it
not
was more
really
than
sure.
that. Yeah, I
More
thought it
than
was
that?
more than that.
Okay, so let's say it's 10%. I don't really know.
From its low point, we rallied back up a bit, but yeah.
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 Okay. So you're saying then that 10% sell off has adjusted these multiples for a sharply slower GDP over the next 3 or 4 quarters.
I'm not talking about the next 3 or 4 quarters. I'm talking about the next one or two, one maybe. Now, let's just say the next quarter. I think the market's still in a trading range, and I think there's downside opportunities. And I'm
I'm
gearing
not
up.
talking about the market and prices now. I'm talking about the multiples on the stocks. We had multiples. The S&P was priced at sort of 25 times earnings,
Mhm.
and I don't know where it's priced now, but I suppose I should, but I don't. So let's call it 20 times earnings. Do you think that's where we're going to settle out, or are we going to settle out at 16, 18 times earnings? And I really think that if we start to see the slowdown that I see coming, we're going to price these earnings much lower.
That's a
So
fair point. I can't argue with that. I'm not, I wouldn't be shocked to see another 8% lower in the overall averages. But I think that the market gets ahead of itself. And I think that 10% move down, you still have people that are looking to sell the rallies. You still have everybody negative. And I think it's still in a trading range and a bias. And it's maybe because it's worked over the last month, selling the downside and buying cheap options. And if you do get given good companies, maybe that's my model that I'm living off of, working off of. But that's been my theory.
I'm afraid. I'm very afraid. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that I bought enough protection now where if we get a good 5-10% drop, I can unwind the protection and live with the stuff I own
Mhm.
and bank the profit.
You know,
And
I,
that's
I, I do have protection on the downside, and I bought some long dated, probably 1 year, very, very low delta oil puts. So if what you're saying, USO, if what you're saying comes true, well, I don't know if we'll see oil at $30 a barrel, but we could see oil at, 45 maybe. And that's going to be a big benefit. Bought a bunch of
mm.
those for really, really cheap, pennies on a dollar. So that's my protection. Plus some of the other puts that I
Well, I
sell.
got the
Yeah.
BX puts. I put them back on. I put a risk reversal on, wrote a call, a high call, and bought close to the money put, a little under the money. So I'll ride that out. Plus, I got a couple of negative puts here and there. Um, I I would not be surprised to see another 10% drop. So if we get it, I'll reassess. But I do think this GDP is poised to slow down for two reasons. One, the tariffs, because I just think it's just going to take time for companies to readjust and reset those gears in the proper wheels. And number two, we still got these Doge layoffs that are lurking out there in the public sector.
What about all this talk about, we've heard for the last X number of years that there's so much money on the sidelines, just waiting, just waiting, just waiting. Where's that money now?
I think it's less than it was, and I think if I'm right, and we see a 5 to 10% drop, it's going to be necessary to cover margin calls.
So a 10% drop with the S&P at 550, you're looking at the S&P at 500.
Not impossible. A sort of 6 week to 2 month time frame could happen in an hour the way these markets move. But
Yeah. Yeah. And the Dow at 36,000. So that would be new lows for both of those indexes, I think.
well, then the technicians will start to try to make you feed on it, and if you get an overreaction, then your low puts should come into play. But I'm I just can't get optimistic here. I mean, I'm very optimistic. I think what he's doing is the right thing. I really do think a risk-based economy as opposed to a government-based economy is the way to go. You get good, solid, long-term growth. But he's got too many variables hitting at the same time here. So I'm sort of more cautious than you, more
And
concerned.
we've been talking about that 18-month window where he's got to get everything done before the midterms. You think that's possible, or you still think or you changing your tune a little bit?
No, I do think it's possible. Uh, it's really hard to be clear about what's happening because the press is so negative, yet his base is positive. I think his base is with him. I saw a statistic somewhere or heard a statistic that IRA people, I guess it was, might have been Vanguard, and I heard it on Varney today. But I guess it was Vanguard that said that 95% of their IRA holders haven't done a trade during this whole sell-off. So these people have stuck with it. So they're looking at this the way we are, that, this is a temporary situation. He's got to revamp. But I do think that if we start to see signs of a sluggish GDP, corporate treasurers, corporate CEOs are going to pull in their horns a little bit and wait until they get these trade deals solidified.
See what happened with Amazon yesterday?
Yeah,
Amazon.
they said, no, not us, we didn't do that. Yeah.
That was very interesting. The cost of the tariffs. I saw another clip today that I thought was funny. Schumer at a press conference saying Trump's poll numbers are the worst of any president in the first 100 days. And a little later, he had a question. Your poll numbers are the worst of any congressional leader in a leadership position. He said, polls come and go. Don't disregard them.
Yeah, right. He also said chaos is 5 letters and Trump has 5 letters and chaos equals Trump. And I would say Chuck equals idiot.
Yeah, polls come and go. Disregard them. This makes nothing.
That guy is such a clown. When he put the raw hamburger on the grill, I said, yeah,
The raw hamburger with the cheese on top. That was
yeah,
the
yeah.
kicker with the cheese
It
on
was a
top.
really smart move there. I
Yeah,
thought, yeah, I'm going to invite him to my barbecue.
that's right. Just stay away, Chucky. Oh boy, what else is going on? What about Canada? That's an interesting turn of events in Canada.
I think Trump stepped on it there and ushered in a liberal. I owned some Canadian ETFs. I unloaded them as soon as I saw the election results.
Yeah,
That's a short wait to happen.
yeah, yeah. Dollar Canada much higher, I imagine. It should be anyway.
Didn't didn't
It
didn't really
hasn't moved
move.
yet. Yeah, it hasn't moved yet, but I think it's much higher. And it really is a shame. Bolivar had the election in the bag, and
Trump
so
cost him that.
yeah.
This 51st state really doesn't go down well with
And
our friends up north. It would bother me too.
yeah,
Yeah.
Alberta is talking about secession. They're getting further on after 9 years, is it, or how many years was Trudeau in power for? They've had enough. Let's see how that breaks out. But that's going to weaken the Canadian dollar.
Yeah. If anything, that would. I remember when the separatists were operating, Canadian dollar collapsed when Quebecois started to make its move back in the 70s. And Alberta now, I mean, that's all the energy.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah,
That's the gas station, you know.
yeah. You lose Alberta, you lose a lot.
Yeah, but that's a long way from happening.
No, but the more they job on it, the more they talk about it. It's gonna get some legs, at least in the press, because misery sells. That's what they want to see. This week we had Spain and Portugal have a huge power outage, and I read something this morning that talked about it's because of renewables, because they're so reliant on solar and one change. Have you looked at that at all? Do you know anything
I
about
saw a headline that blamed sunspots or sun activity or something like that. And I thought, who the hell knows what really, I'm so jaded
it?
after COVID. I don't believe anything that anybody says anyway, much less from Europe. So yeah, um, but the energy picture is precarious. I mean, AI is dominating, and nuclear energy takes so long. Now that I saw an advertisement for a company touting a mini nuclear reactor, small nuclear reactors. To, who knows? Don't put your money anywhere around that. For me, natural gas is still the mainstay. I think that's going to get to play. Oil, drill baby drill is still here. They're going to frack. We're going to have plenty of natural gas. I still like the natural gas carriers, although that trade hasn't worked at
That
all.
trade has not worked. Yeah, getting beat up on that myself. Yeah, I think oil lower. I think oil lower for a couple of reasons. As you say, drill, baby, drill. and the prospects of a slowing economy is going to feed into it. Um,
This was a big deal. He threw a monkey wrench into global trade here. I think it was a smart move. He had to do it, and I could see why he did it. Get everybody talking at the same time. You're a new CEO. You step into a situation and you say, put out an RFP to everybody that deals with us and everybody that wants to deal with us and bring them in. And maybe after all these conversations, I'm going to cut my costs by 10, 15%. And that's a plus. But we got to have all these conversations. And, some people in the media are going to use this as an opportunity to take shots at me, and it's going to hurt my image and blah, blah, blah. But if I want to get things done by the midterm, this is what I got to do.
and I saw that Rand Paul yesterday said he's got enough votes to kill the tariffs. So I don't know how
Well,
that
his
plays
argument
out.
is really constitutional, and
Yeah,
he's right. Executives shouldn't have the kind of power that Trump is claiming he has. And who knows where that goes. But that's another argument for me, slowing down everything and having this ship dead in the water for a month or so.
yeah, yeah. It's a fair point. That's a fair point. But it is an interesting close today. We had that big, huge sell-off in the morning. Dow was down 600, and I think it's up 250. I don't know if there was any news out, any comments that changed anything, but the close was very interesting.
Two-way risk, trading range. You have risk on the upside and risk on the downside. And then we're going to have to live with
Yeah,
that for a while. They're going to be leaking out good news when they can. By the way, if we got to deal with India, China has really got to be concerned about that. And you see what happened with Apple. Tim Cook made his move for iPhones. He's building iPhone production and moving it to India. That's a huge deal.
yeah, yeah. We've been talking about India for a while. I've owned the India ETF for a while, and that INDA hasn't really done much, but I would expect that to start to rally.
Tough to do business in India,
Yeah,
but they,
can't
they
get money out of
represent
it.
they represent the low cost producer. And if they change the tariffs, they don't really have the trade barriers that other people have, or at least from what I could see anyway.
In the FX market, retail brokers always wanted to deal with India, open up India, and the major problem was getting funds out of India. So what they would do is this was as of a couple of years ago, I guess it's still available. People would fly from India to Dubai with cash, open up their banks in Dubai, and that's how they would get money out of the country. So you would get the Indian people working it. It's a it's a huge market, but it's been very tough to penetrate.
Well, if you compare India to China, number one, they speak English. That's a plus to American companies.
To the west, yeah.
Yeah, uh, you can't really overstate the value of that. You get around things. Number two, they have a better position on intellectual property. And that is a sticking point. Boy, I tell you, if I were a CEO and I had to give up my IP to do business in China, I would just shrug it off and say I could do without it. Your IP it's your ideas, it's everything, and to give it up to the golden share and the 51% owner and all the rest of it. I mean, that's a non-starter for me.
Hmm.
But people do it,
Yeah,
and I
people have
guess they
done it.
continue to
Yeah.
do it. You know. And then the other thing is, and I don't know where India stands on this, but the Chinese have delivered in a couple of major instances inferior products. That building that went down in Asia, I guess it was in not Taiwan, but somewhere in Asia. I'm trying to think of where.
Earthquake, or was it?
Well, it was a building that collapsed. Chinese steel. Turned out it was inferior steel.
Okay.
That was a big deal. And I can remember here in Florida, we had this issue with Chinese plasterboard. People were buying Chinese plasterboard, put it up, started melting in the walls. You know,
There was also
that's
stuff
not good.
about Chinese laminate flooring. That was a problem
Yeah, that
too.
was the other one. It was
Right.
leaking carcinogens.
Right.
Yeah, it reminds me of the old Simpsons series, the old Simpsons cartoon, where Bart went to France and he was trying to learn French, and he found they were starving him, they weren't feeding him, they were beating him, and he noticed that they were adulterating the wine. And when he reported it, he said, they've got me hostage, they got me a slave. And the guy said, wine? That's very serious, you know. And one guy put kerosene in the wine and said, let the kid try it. I bet it doesn't even blind him, you know. And that's how I feel about some of the things that I've seen in China. God knows what they'll put kerosene and who knows what they're doing.
I was in
But,
Shanghai at a restaurant with a Chinese American who spoke fluent Chinese, does a lot of business, did a lot of business in China, and we're sitting at a restaurant, and the guy looked at me and he says, "Oh, they have Budweiser. That's great." So he orders in Chinese two Budweisers, and we're speaking English as we're going back and forth. And the waiter comes back and he puts two bottles down, and they were green bottles. And my friend is yelling at the waiter. He's just screaming in Chinese. And I said, "What's the change? What's going on?" He says, "It's knockoff." He says, "You know, Budweiser comes in a brown bottle." He says, "This is knockoff Budweiser." So the guy came back with two brown bottles of Bud, two real Bud. So
yeah,
like even
nice try.
Budweiser,
Nice
even
try.
beer, they're knocking off. It was yeah, it's something else. It is an experience going over.
Okay, so short term, I've gone from bullish to bearish.
Yeah.
Just 2 days ago, I was bullish. I had no protection on. Now I got all kinds of protection, downside protection on. The GDP spooked me. I thought, okay, the slowdown's beginning, and maybe it's not.
We
Maybe
got
some
to
of the things.
something happened with the close, and we really have to look into why this rallied back up the way it did. I don't know if it's just as you say, maybe it is just the trading range, or if there's some news out that changed the focus. But something did change at around 2 o'clock this afternoon, 3 o'clock this afternoon, and I'd be curious to see how that played out.
All right,
Um, yeah,
stay tuned.
I don't can't disagree with you. We'll see how it all plays out, but thanks for everything. And folks, if you're still watching, listening, press the like button, press the subscribe button. Let us know what you think. Thanks, Tim.
Okay,
Take care.
okay.